you ready?
And welcome into our Charter Road Hospitality Studios here at the Hampton Inn East in Oxford, located right by the Oxford Conference Center. This is Hotty Toddy Hotline. I'm your host, Browning Stubbs, as usual, and it's Alabama week, the most exciting week of the season for Ole Miss football fans. And last year, of course, Ole Miss upsetting Alabama in Oxford. This year, Ole Miss goes to Alabama as they try to beat the Crimson Tide for the first time since 1988 in Tuscaloosa, when former co-host of this show, Billy Brewer, was the coach of the Rebels back then. And Alabama, they open up as a 6-7 point favorite against Ole Miss, but Ole Miss, they look pretty impressive. They lead the nation in points scored throughout this season. They've scored 149 points in their first two games of the season against UT Martin and Fresno State. We're going to talk about why the offense has been so successful, and one of those offensive players that has led to all that success is the new quarterback, Chad Kelly. We'll talk much more about Chad Kelly, how he's fitting into the offense, how everyone's responding to his great play, and much more. And then later on in the show, we'll talk a little more about the SEC and Ole Miss Alabama with Ryan Fowler of our CRM Sports Family Network sister show, Bama Roll Call. And we'll get to some more Ole Miss sports towards the end of the show. It's going to be a great show. Turn your radio up. Let's get it going. This is Hotty Toddy Hotline.
Hey, Rebels, your truck is here. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford presents the all-new Ram Rebel. It's Ram, the Rebel way. Send an unmistakable signal. Rebel 24/7. Ram Rebel from your friend in the car business. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford.
Come by, let's be friends.
And welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. We'd love for all of our fans to get in touch with the show. If you want to call or text us, call 803-816-1170. You can find us on Twitter at Hotty Toddy Hotline, Facebook at Hotty Toddy Hotline as well. And our shows are broadcast on YouTube as well. So just search Hotty Toddy Hotline and you can check Browning, me, myself, and much more Ole Miss football coverage on Hotty Toddy Hotline. We'd love to hear from the fans. If there's any topics that you guys would love for us to talk about, we would be happy to do that for you. All right, let's talk Fresno State, the big 73-21 win over the Bulldogs from Northern California. And I'm going to talk about the quarterback play to start off our segment here on Hotty Toddy Hotline. Hugh Freeze, before the game against Fresno State, said that the QB competition race was still going on and that he had not named a starter for the entire season yet. He did say it was Chad Kelly's to lose, but Chad Kelly did nothing to lose that job in the game against Fresno State. Chad Kelly, what a performance from the transfer from Clemson. Came in, and he's looked really well in his first two games. Let's talk about his stats in this game. Chad Kelly goes 24-25, 346 yards, 4 touchdowns, a QB rating of 98.1, and he even rushed in for a touchdown as well. Chad Kelly looked really well, and it started on the opening drive. Chad Kelly kept the pace going. Completed pass after pass and found Cody Core from 14 yards out to put the Rebels up 7-0 early in that one. And then Chad Kelly on his second drive got Ole Miss in the end zone again, finding Laquan Treadwell. Laquan Treadwell looked a little rusty in the first game against Tennessee Martin, but Kelly found Treadwell for a couple big catches on the second drive, and then Kelly ended up rushing in for a 4-yard score to put Ole Miss up 4-0. And then one guy that had a game for Ole Miss was Quincy Adeboyejo. Chad Kelly looks very comfortable with Quincy Adeboyejo. Adeboyejo had 5 catches for 120 yards and 3 touchdowns. And on that was the third drive for Ole Miss, Kelly found the end zone as he threw a 16-yard pass to Quincy. And, Chad Kelly again on the next drive, on the only 2 plays for Ole Miss. He found Adebayo again for a 50-yard touchdown. So Chad Kelly was all over the place for Ole Miss in this one, and then later on in the second quarter, so he found again Adebayo, this one from 44 yards out. Ole Miss led at halftime 35-14, and in the second half dominated as well, as they only gave up 1 touchdown and put up 38 points. Chad Kelly, after the game, Hugh Freeze said that Chad Kelly was going to be the starter for the season, that he had done nothing to lose that job, played really well. I mean, just so efficient. He hasn't been sacked all season. You know, that one interception he threw in the first game wasn't his fault. It was a drop by Quan Treadwell. Hasn't fumbled the ball either. Chad Kelly just, he's doing fantastic things at Ole Miss in his first couple games. The other quarterbacks that played, Ryan Buchanan came in. He threw a pick 6. So Buchanan kind of lost his chance at the starting role because of that. Devontae Kincaid did not. He came in, threw 2 for 6. Didn't have a lot of good throws, as Devontae did run the ball pretty well, though, for 48 yards. Led the team in rushing. Free said that Devontae will always have a package of plays that he will run. But Chad Kelly, I mean, this is a guy that Ole Miss fans have been dreaming of having. Bo Wallace was great. He did a lot of good things. He was a strong quarterback. Had a lot of chemistry with the Con Treadwell, Dante Moncrief, guys like that. But what Bo didn't have was a deep arm. Bo Wallace never really, threw 40-yard, 50-yard passes that we're seeing from Chad Kelly. Kelly feels very comfortable. He's throwing the ball in stride, and he's really just connecting with all of his receivers. God bless Bo Wallace, but I think it's best for Ole Miss fans to have this deep ball threat in Chad Kelly when you have talented wide receivers in Quincy Adebayo, Laquan Treadwell, Cody Core, Evan Ingram at tight end. So Ole Miss is happy to have Kelly, and if he can keep up this really stellar play the rest of the season, then Kelly could possibly be a Heisman contender, which leads into next year. Would Kelly go to the NFL or would he stay? If he stays, I mean, I think you're Ole Miss. You got to hope that Shea Patterson will want to redshirt his first year at Ole Miss, so Kelly could play out his senior year, and then you could have one more year of Chad Kelly, and then have another 4 years of Shea Patterson. So Chad Kelly, he looks very comfortable going into Alabama. Bryant-Denny Stadium, the lights will be on him. ESPN will be broadcasting that game. Can Kelly be the man to go in Tuscaloosa and lead Ole Miss to a victory? Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that are going to think that he can. I mean, he's just been so efficient. Everyone seems to be motivated by him. He's really fitting in a lot better than I thought he would through the first 2 games. I mean, I knew he was a good quarterback, but this deep ball that he's got, man, it is very, very impressive. So that game will be Saturday, 8:15 in Tuscaloosa, and Chad Kelly will be the starting quarterback for the Rebels in that one. All right, coming up, we're going to talk to Ryan Fowler of Bama Roll Call, and Ryan will talk to us more about Ole Miss, Alabama, and he'll give his thoughts on some other things going on in the SEC West. So don't go anywhere. Stay right here on Hotty Toddy Hotline. Welcome back to Hotty Toddy Hotline. And now let's talk a little bit more about victory over Fresno. We talked about the quarterback play. One other stat about a receiver is Evan Ingram. Through 2 games, Evan Ingram is only got 1 catch for 5 yards. He got that the first game against Tennessee Martin. Ole Miss, they don't see it as a concern. It's just Chad Kelly's finding he's taken what the defense is giving him, and he's making good throws, finding a lot of people open. And, Evan, I mean, he'll show up eventually, but it's not a big concern that he hasn't really been a productive part of the offense. On the defensive side of the ball, Ole Miss played very well against Fresno. Had 3 interceptions, recovered a fumble, and it was really a special game for Ole Miss. Trey Elston had a 38-yard interception return for a touchdown. Chief Brown had a 22-yard touchdown return, and C.J. Johnson, the senior linebacker, had a 70-yard interception return. C.J. did not score, but he did return it. Ole Miss looked very impressive, sacking Fresno's quarterbacks Zach Greenlee and Chasen Virgil a couple times, and it was very good. Ole Miss also played that game without their star left tackle Laramie Tunsil. Now, Ole Miss is still cooperating with the SEC, with the SEC and the NCAA about Laramie Tunsil's eligibility. They are still doing an investigation on Tunsil to see if there may have been any wrongdoing in his recruiting, but Ole Miss, they are really trying to get this resolved. Hopefully we'll hear something this week on it, because Ole Miss, like we talked with Ryan Fowler, they're going to need Laramie Tunsil in order to beat the Crimson Tide. They're going to need him to protect Chad Kelly's blindside. They're going to need Tunsil to open up a lot of space for the running backs. He may be a little rusty if he does play against Alabama, because he hasn't played in the first 2 games of the season, but you got to have him. I mean, guys like Fawn Cooper have filled in nicely for Ole Miss, but you do have to have that star left tackle in Laramie Tunsil, who is being projected by a couple sites to be the number 1 pick in the next year's NFL draft. But my personal opinion on the Laramie Tunsil status is this. He's already played 2 years for you. He's already, helped win you some ball games. So you're holding him out. I understand it, because the NCAA, now they're just starting to investigate it. They didn't do that 2 years ago. But the thing is, if he's found ineligible, Ole Miss is going to have to forfeit those wins no matter what from the previous 2 seasons. So I don't see why he can't play. I mean, because if he is ineligible, then those 2 seasons in the past will mean nothing by the record books. But as far as this season, if you do hold them out, 4 games is what's kind of been reported for whenever there's an eligibility scandal. But if you hold them out the whole season, then Ole Miss, they will keep this season in the record book, and hopefully nothing bad will come of it. But I mean, it's going to be a huge risk for Coach Hugh Freeze to see what he decides to do with Tunsil. I mean, personally, I think you got to play him if you're going to have any chance to beat Alabama, because the Ole Miss running backs, they totaled about 170, 80 yards on the ground against Fresno State. But to beat Alabama, you're going to have to get more than that, in my opinion. You're going to have to get around 200 from your backs, and Jalen Walden, Jordan Wilkins, Akeem Judd, Eugene Brasley. So there's going to be, you have to have a lot of contribution from the running backs. And with Tunsil, you got to have him in the mix to help you out with that. One other key note about this game is Trey Elston is expected, not Trey Elston, T. Shepard is expected to miss the first half against Alabama because of a targeting penalty that he received in the game over Fresno State. That will be confirmed later in the week. But that's going to be a big loss for Ole Miss in the first half. Ole Miss did move up to number 11 in the coaches poll. Also moved up 2 spots to number 15 in the Associated Press poll. So Ole Miss, they scoring 149 points in the first 2 games, are going to move up. Also, Auburn dropped to 18 with their, I might call, pathetic win over Jacksonville State, because it did go to overtime, and a bad punt by Jacksonville State kind of gave Auburn a great chance to get in scoring position. But overall, Ole Miss doing well, moving up in the polls, getting a lot of national recognition, as this game is going to be on College Game Day. Last year's was as well, so this will be the 3rd game in the last 2 years that Ole Miss has been on College Game Day, as they were on it last year for the home game against Alabama and for the away game against LSU, and now against Alabama again. So we are going to talk more Ole Miss football and some more Ole Miss sports in just a little bit when Hotty Toddy Hotline returns.
Because you want more flavor, at Nuke's we marinate and grill to perfection. Because you want the latest culinary tastes and trends, we never rest. At Nuke's, great food drives us. So we are meticulous in our preparation, obsessed with the quality of our ingredients, and uncompromising about serving you our very best. We believe that sharing a memorable meal is one of life's ultimate pleasures. Join us at Nuke's Eatery.
And welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. I'm Browning Stubbs. We have a very special guest on our sister show on the CRM Sports Family Network. Ryan Fowler of Bama Roll Call joins us to talk all things Ole Miss and Alabama coming up this weekend at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Brian, what's going on?
Hey, nothing much. Just headed to the radio station to do my afternoon show here in Tuscaloosa, and no doubt a big part of Bama Roll Call as well. And just listening to Nick Saban talk about Ole Miss for about 30 minutes, and seems like this team is very focused, and I think they know that the previous two games have been more like pop quizzes, and that this is the real big test. This will find out if Alabama is going to be a contender or they're a pretender in college football. Right now they're number two, as you know, but still they haven't been challenged in so many different areas. So we'll find out if this team is a legitimate national champion type contender this coming Saturday night against Ole Miss.
And Ryan, let's talk about last year's game for just a quick minute here. Ole Miss, they pulled the upset over Alabama in Oxford. College Game Day was here. Katy Perry was here. It was quite the show in Oxford. But, you know, there's still several Alabama players that are on that team. You know, Derrick Henry, the star running back for the Crimson Tide. You know, what's their mindset about Ole Miss? You know, a team that Alabama had their number for many years until last year. I mean, is this a game where that Alabama has been circling for this whole season since, you know, Ole Miss did beat them last year?
Well, you know, when you look at Alabama, and I've spoken to several different players in conversations post-game and then again today, and every time it comes up, you know, Alabama's one of the players told me, he said, you know, Alabama, we don't lose very many games here. So every one of those losses stick out to me. And I think when you look at Nick Saban, I think that's a reflection of his personality from the players, is because I've often thought Nick Saban, as far as my analysis, and I was here when he got off the plane in Tuscaloosa, so I've covered him every year that he's been here, been in business since 2000. So Nick Saban, I think, is more bothered. In other words, he hates to lose more than he likes to win, if that makes any sense at all. Some coaches just cannot stand losing. He likes to win, but he really hates to lose, and it eats at him, and it, you know, keeps him up at night. But these players are pretty much, they're focused. And just speaking with the guys like Derrick Henry, Ron Kelly, Bijan Robinson, Cyrus Jones just a few minutes ago, you can tell that they're focused on this game, and I think it's one. I would probably say that the Ole Miss fans shouldn't really get caught up into that, because it's the first big test. If this was Arkansas, well, I don't know about Arkansas after losing this weekend, but if this was Mississippi State or if this was Tennessee, it would just be that next SEC game that would immediately grab your attention. And I think the Ole Miss Rebels, with the offensive production they've been able to put up in the first 2 weeks, automatically grabs our attention. And so I think that's something that, is it a revenge game? I don't know if it's a revenge game. I think it'll help them with a focus this week in practice. But at the end of the day, when the pads are strapped on and the ball's kicked off on Saturday night, I don't think there'll be too many players going back and looking at that Ole Miss game. I think it'll help them in game prep, but I don't think it's one of those revenge games where, oh, you know what, Ole Miss embarrassed Alabama. We got to find a way to get back at them. I don't see it that way, but it could be.
Ryan, let's look at some of the individual matchups in this game on Saturday. Let's start with the quarterbacks. Chad Kelly of Ole Miss, Jake Coker of Alabama. Both guys are making their first SEC start of their careers. You know, at Ole Miss, you know, we've obviously been impressed with Chad Kelly. He's really got a deep ball that has clicked really well with some of the receivers here. But we've also been watching our rival in Tuscaloosa, Jacob Coker. It seems like he's fitting in very well with the Tide as well. So if you would please just kind of assess the two quarterbacks going into this matchup.
Well, you got to give the nod, I think, to Ole Miss in this situation with a quarterback that's had this much production early on. I think the indication is right now that Ole Miss has got a better quarterback. Now, Jacob Coker is going to be asked to more of a game manager type role. I don't think he's going to be asked to go out there and win the football game. In other words, it's going to be a very game plan that's not going to try to get him beat. So I'd have to give the nod to Kelly there in Oxford as far as being the better quarterback and just with his upside. Jacob's got a great arm, but he lacks on some of those quick middle decisions. Now, middle decisions is not a problem. He's not like he's a dummy or anything. He just second guesses himself a lot. And I think that's where, when you look at this SEC play, you might have got away with a pass against Middle Tennessee or maybe against Wisconsin. That's a Big Ten team, but you won't get by with that in the SEC. They'll do a pick six and take it to the house. I think that's when you look at this quarterback play. I think that's what it'll come down to. It may not be the completions that he's able to throw. It cannot prevent mistakes of INTs. We'll see if that happens. I would have to give the nod to Ole Miss as far as the advantage in the quarterback department.
A lot of people in Ole Miss, Ryan, are saying that Ole Miss, they really aren't going to be able to win this game without having their star tackle, Laramie Tunsil, over at left tackle. Alabama, obviously, they have a dominant defensive line that will probably bring the house towards Chad Kelly. I mean, do you kind of see it that way as well? I mean, does Ole Miss have to have Tunsil in this game to have a shot to beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa for the first time since the late 80s?
Well, you go back to Wisconsin, and I will say this, and this is for anybody. Any team that plays Alabama, if you've got any questions in the offensive line department and you've got an injury or you've got a guy that's missing, and maybe you could update me a little bit on Tunsil because I don't even know. I know he's missed the first two games, but what is the latest there? I may ask that question to you just for my information. But when you look at that offensive line, if there's any questions or there's a guy that's banged up or there's some type of chemistry issues on that offensive line, Alabama will expose that. This is the best defensive line in college football. And I know the argument would say back in Oxford, no, we have a great defensive line. But when you look at the depth of this team, 9 to 10 defensive linemen, it doesn't get any better than this in college football. And if you've got questions on the offensive line, they will quickly get exposed against Alabama and Ole Miss.
So far, through the first two games, Ole Miss and Alabama, they've both been pretty impressive. I would say more so for Alabama against Wisconsin, but for Ole Miss, some of their weaknesses are at the linebacker position and the running game. But for Alabama, what are some weaknesses that you think Ole Miss might be able to exploit?
Secondary, easy. It's a young secondary. The communication has not been there the first two games, and I think that's, if you're an Ole Miss guy and you're looking for a way to beat Alabama, attack the secondary. Attack the secondary. That's where you're not going to run on this team. Herschel Walker and Bo Jackson didn't run on this team. And I'm talking about, when I say run, I'm talking about, putting up big numbers against Alabama. There's just not any room. These guys are not Superman. I mean, they're not able to fly over the defensive line. There's just no room when you look at the size and just how physical they are at the front seven. But if you want to beat Alabama, and I think you can do this if you pass the football successfully. So when I look at Ole Miss and I look at the game plan with the multiple wide receivers that they've got there, I like, if you're looking at it from an Ole Miss, perspective, then you would have to like the matchup between Ole Miss wide receivers, Chad Kelly, and then also going up against the Tide secondary. If he's got time to throw the football, then that will work out in the Ole Miss favor.
Just a couple more questions before I let you go, Ryan. Let's talk about the SEC West and kind of what happened over the weekend. My personal picks before the season, I had Alabama winning the division at 11-1. I had Ole Miss going 10-2 in second place. I wasn't really high on Auburn, but Auburn, they barely squeak out a win over Jacksonville State, and of course Arkansas gets beat at home by Toledo. I mean, what do you think happened there? I mean, do you think the SEC is kind of losing some of its power, or do you think that Auburn, Arkansas might have just been a little overrated?
Well, I think Auburn is definitely overrated. Arkansas probably so. I got to be honest with you, just because of my responsibility here in Tuscaloosa, I didn't have a chance to watch Arkansas and Toledo, so I don't exactly know what happened there because I was in the press box here at Alabama watching this game. But I did have a chance to watch Auburn and Jacksonville State. I've watched Auburn for 2 weeks. If you're an Auburn fan, you have to be very disappointed with what they've been able to show on the defensive side of the football. This team's got worse on the defensive side. And I don't think that's why they paid the big money to get Muschamp in there, is to get worse on the defensive side of the football. Secondary's a problem. You're not able to stop the run, which they were not able to do against Jacksonville State or the Louisville Cardinals. And by the way, Louisville got beat this weekend by Houston. So they've got some major problems on the Plains, and this year it doesn't look like that they're going to be able to bail each other out with the offensive production. And so I think when you really get to staring at it, Auburn dropped all the way to 18th in one poll. It was 12 spots from 6 to 18, and I think the other they fell to 15. Nonetheless, they're out of the top 10, and really this weekend will probably push them out of the top 25. I think LSU beats them like a drum. Because if you're not able to stop the run, that's not a good thing when you're playing LSU, especially down there. So I think Auburn and Arkansas, I guess when you lose to Toledo, that's the bad. But we're seconds away. We're a shank punt away from Auburn losing to Jacksonville State, which is a Division II, using the old terms, 1AA team. So Auburn's got some problems. Auburn's got some real problems, and I think they know it. Now they're not going to admit it. It's a very delusional fan base. But it is what it is. I mean, Auburn is staring a lot of losses right there in the face, and they see it coming, but they're right now in the complete denial, and, maybe they can find a way to find something in the next 4 days.
And one last question before we let you go, Ryan. Ole Miss, Alabama. Vegas has Alabama as a 6.5-point favorite going into the game on Saturday. What's your prediction? Who do you have winning, and what's the score?
Well, I think Alabama is going to win just because Ole Miss has had a lot of success here inside Bryant Stadium. But when I look at this game, it opened up at 8.5. It immediately went down to like 6.5. I think that tells you where the experts are at. People that are amateurs normally play this towards the end of the week. If they're going to play this game. But I think the experts jumped on that pretty quick and drove that line down immediately. So I would take, I'm not a gambling guy, but I would take Ole Miss in the point. I think Alabama's going to win, but I don't think they'll cover.
That's Ryan Fowler of Bama Roll Call that you can check out from 2 to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday on the CRM Sports Family Network. All right, Ryan, well, I'll let you go, and I'll see you in the press box on Saturday.
Absolutely, yeah. Look me up, and we'll have one of these Bryant-Denny Stadium dogs. They got some great stadium dogs here inside Bryant-Denny Stadium, and they'll actually feed us for free, so that's always good. So, no, I'm just kidding, but hey, we'll have a lot of fun. And nonetheless, if you love college football, this is going to be a game for you Saturday night inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. Hey, thanks so much for talking to me, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week there in Oxford, Mississippi.
We will. Thanks for joining us, Ryan. All right, we're going to take a commercial break and talk more Ole Miss football when we return on Hotty Toddy Hotline. Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. Now we're going to look at Alabama, at the Alabama Crimson Tide. They are the number 2 ranked team in the country. Alabama, of course, head coach is Nick Saban. Nick Saban's led Alabama to 3 national championships, and something that Ole Miss is trying to do this season. But in order to do that, they're likely going to have to beat Alabama on the road. But let's go into a little bit of inside the numbers with Alabama here on Hotty Toddy Hotline. New quarterback for Alabama is Jacob Coker. Jacob Coker was on Florida State just a couple years ago, and Jameis Winston and Coker were kind of in the battle for the starting quarterback position at Florida State. But apparently Coker almost beat out Winston for that starting quarterback position at Florida State, which that would have been a completely different story for Jameis Winston, who ended up being the number 1 pick this past year by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he also won a Heisman Trophy just a couple years ago. But Jake Coker on the season looking pretty solid. 30 for 47 for 427 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. So he's a guy that's looking very comfortable in this Alabama offense. Ryan Fowler was on the show just a little while ago. He said that Coker's more of a game manager and that Ole Miss is going to have to really key on the running game for Alabama because that's their strong suit. Lane Kiffin, their offensive coordinator, likes to give the ball to his big backs with guys like Derrick Henry, Damian Harris, Kenyon Drake, and they're led by Derrick. Derrick Henry is going to be a Heisman contender this year. Through 2 games, he has 243 yards on the ground and 6 touchdowns. So he's got 6 touchdowns in 2 games. So he is certainly, already climbing the Heisman track already. And Alabama, they're always known for a star running back. It was T.J. Yeldon last year. In the past they've had Eddie Lacy, Trent Richardson, Mark Ingram, Glenn Coffey. So many good running backs Alabama has. All of them go to the NFL. Derrick Henry will probably be one of them as well. Ole Miss, they've given up a lot of rushing yards to Alabama in the past. Now, you could argue that this might be the strongest defense the Rebels have ever had, but they're going to have to key on some of those guys that I just mentioned. When we look at the receivers for Alabama, Kenyon Drake, he's a guy that he runs the ball, also is a receiver. He's a guy that leads Alabama with 139 receiving yards on the season. He's got 1 touchdown. Also, Robert Foster is another big receiver for the Crimson Tide. The sophomore already has 2 touchdowns on the season. And Alabama, one thing that they haven't done on the season is they have not made a field goal, which is kind of interesting. They are 0 for 4, and that's kicker Adam Griffith. So if you're the Ole Miss defense, you really want to put Alabama in bad spots. You hope they will kick field goals because their kicker has missed 4 on the season. He's not made 1. So that's not a good start for the Alabama kicking game. And then when we throw it over to Ole Miss, we mentioned Chad Kelly in the segment before. Chad Kelly, already 557 yards on the year, 6 touchdowns for him, and you got 6 guys with at least 70 rushing yards already on the season for Ole Miss, of course, led by Jalen Walden and Jordan Wilkins. The receiving core, it's kind of been a little bit of a surprise that Cody Core and Quincy Adeboyejo lead Ole Miss in receiving yards and touchdowns for the first 2 games. You might have thought that would have been Laquan Treadwell and Evan Ingram, but Treadwell, coming off that brutal leg injury, is still trying to check off some rust. Evan Ingram, just 1 catch for 5 yards on the season. He's going to have to definitely get more involved if Ole Miss is going to go to Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama. Defense is going really well for Ole Miss. They continue to grab a lot of interceptions. Trey Elston, T. Shepard, C.J. Johnson made his return in the game against Fresno State. Robert Kimdichie, has got a couple sacks on the season, a blocked field goal against UT Martin. And he also, I didn't mention this, but he had a rushing touchdown against Fresno State, and of course he had the receiving touchdown against UT Martin. So Robert Kimdichie has really been all over the place for the Ole Miss Rebels. So Ole Miss, like I said earlier, a 6.5-point underdog to go into Bryant-Denny Stadium and take if they're going to pull the upset. Their last 2 meetings in Tuscaloosa, Ole Miss, they have not been that successful. Back in 2013, Ole Miss fell 25-0. That was the only shutout in the Bo Wallace era, as Ole Miss really got nothing going on in that game. 2 years before that, though, Ole Miss did run a kickoff back to take a 6-0 lead, but after that, Alabama pretty much dominated that one as they won 33-14. Ole Miss, just to recap what it's going to take to beat Alabama, Hugh Freeze is going to have to make some smart play calls. He's going to have to find some balance with his running backs. What works for Ole Miss, they like to do some screen passes to Treadwell, Adeboyejo, and those seem to work a lot. Also, Chad Kelly. if you're going to go into Bryant-Denny and win, Chad Kelly's going to have to continue throwing those deep balls because Alabama, their secondary, it's their biggest weakness according to Ryan Fowler. So if Ole Miss can exploit that secondary, make some deep throws, get Quincy Adebojo, Cody Core, Laquan Treadwell, some momentum and some rhythm, then Ole Miss is going to have a very good chance to pull the upset. Ole Miss and Alabama, they kick off Saturday at 8:15. I will be in Tuscaloosa giving you coverage, and it's going to be a very good one. All right, well, that wraps up this segment on Hotty Toddy Hotline. Coming up on the show, we're going to talk a little bit about the SEC West, and we'll talk a few other Ole Miss sports. Soccer doing well, volleyball doing well. Head coach Steve McRobert, soccer coach Matt Mott are all doing really great things here in Oxford. We'll get to all that and much more coming up on Hotty Toddy Hotline.
Hey, Rebels, your truck is here. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford presents the all-new Ram Rebel. It's Ram, the Rebel way. Send an unmistakable signal. Rebel 24/7. Ram Rebel from your friend in the car business. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford.
Come by, let's be friends.
And welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. Browning Stubbs here with you as usual. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Charter Road Hospitality, for letting us use their studios and their fantastic properties are ones that you should come and check out. We're at the Hampton Inn East in Oxford by the Conference Center. Just a fantastic place. We are in the lobby. If you ever need to come here and do some business, they have private meeting rooms. They have free coffee 24/7. A great place here. The Town Place Suites, the newest property here in Oxford, they are just right across the block from us. And also over on Jackson by the Huddle House is the other Hampton Inn in Oxford, also a Holiday Inn Express. And we'd like to thank Charter Road Hospitality for all that they do. Let's get to a little bit of the SEC and what happened over the weekend. We saw Tennessee. They had a 17-0 lead over Oklahoma, ended up losing that one, and they lost that one in overtime. That was a pretty big game, but Butch Jones he still can't get that big win like they've been trying to get over in Knoxville. Auburn looked pretty bad in their 27-20 overtime win over Jacksonville State. It took a late touchdown in the final minute to beat Jacksonville State. One other big game, Arkansas fell to Toledo 16-12. Arkansas maybe not as good as we thought as they dropped that one. Vanderbilt loses to Georgia at home, not a big surprise there. Also around the SEC, we saw LSU and Mississippi State. LSU comes up with the close 21-19 victory over the Bulldogs. Texas A&M, impressive 56-23 win over Ball State. Arkansas State was beating Mizzou through 3 quarters, and Mizzou came back in the 4th quarter and won that one. Kentucky gets the big 26-22 victory over South Carolina. That's 2 years in a row that Mark Stoops has beaten Steve Spurrier and the Gamecocks. And that wraps up most of the Florida also beat Eastern Carolina 31-24. Jim McElwain gets another win for the Florida Gators. All right, now let's switch gears over to Ole Miss soccer. The Ole Miss soccer team is they had 2 games over the weekend. They hosted number 18 Kentucky on Friday. They weren't able to defeat the Wildcats in that one as Ole Miss fell to Kentucky 4-2 in that one, but Ole Miss responded with a victory over the weekend to beat Louisville 2-1. Ole Miss is back in action on Friday as they will take on the Florida Gators in Gainesville, and then they'll play the Memphis Tigers on Sunday coming up. And the volleyball team, Ole Miss volleyball, they are continuing their winning ways as They got a sweep of the Rebel Classic, defeating Belmont 3-0, Buffalo 3-2, and Southern Miss 3-0. They are back in action on Wednesday as they host Lipscomb. So Ole Miss volleyball 10-1 on the season, with their one loss coming at home to Tennessee Martin. And Ole Miss soccer, they are 5-1-2 on the season, just one loss, and that just happened last Friday to Kentucky. Other Ole Miss notes: Ole Miss baseball, they announced their schedule for the 2016 season. They play 19 games versus 2015 NCAA tournament teams, including 15 at Swayze Field. And also, the Ole Miss Vanderbilt football game has been decided. That will be a 6 o'clock p.m. matchup at Vaught Hemingway Stadium on September 26th. And ESPNU will broadcast the action as Ole Miss takes on their SEC East rival Vanderbilt. And that one, that's the latest Ole Miss game that we are trying to find out what time it'll be against. Still waiting on when the Florida game is. That's in Gainesville. A lot of people trying to make travel accommodations for that one, so hopefully that will be announced as well. All right, well, we did the best that we could for you guys this week on Hotty Toddy Hotline. We talked with Ryan Fowler of Bama Roll Call on our sister show on CRM Sports, and we also gave you a lot of analysis about Ole Miss and Alabama coming up this Saturday, 8:15 in Tuscaloosa. It's going to be a good one, and I was happy to provide all the coverage for you guys this week. Go Rebels! And for our executive producer, John Raw, I'm Browning Stubbs. Thank you for tuning in to Hotty Toddy Hotline on the Colonel Reb Radio Network.